Hello, I'm Chuck Duplant, one of the volunteers here at Brazos Bend State Park. Today we're going to talk about insects. And insects occur in every ecosystem here at the park. Right now we're out on the prairie, and when most people think of prairie, they only think of the grasses. But there's a whole world of insects that live within the prairie, and that's what we're going to show y'all today. Okay, as you can see, we dumped what we netted, and we can see a variety of things. I got a grasshopper here. So this little grasshopper is not quite full grown yet, and it appears to be one of the little spur-throated grasshoppers. We have quite a few species of grasshoppers here, and when they're in the nymph stage, some of them can be a little difficult to ID. And you can see a bunch of little ants moving around. Here's another, looks like maybe even a little spider. Here we have a little spider. And if you ever been out on the prairie or in a grassy area, little meadow, when the fog's there, you'll see just thousands and thousands of spider webs. Well, spiders will make their webs, and these that you find in the prairie, some of them may be this big as mature adults, and some of them can be even smaller, the size of a pinhead. Even though they're completely grown, you don't see them till you see the webs, and they can be almost impossible to identify when they're in that small spider species. Now, spiders aren't insects. They have two body parts. Insects have three. So we have the head, the thorax, and then the abdomen, whereas a spider has the head and the cephalothorax, or the cephalothorax and the abdomen. Variety of ants. Here we got a tiny beetle. Just little bitty beetles who ID. So there's a lot of little bitty things. Now we're finding all this out in the prairie. You would have insects in your own backyard. You'll have a lot of butterflies, you'll have some native bees, you might even have grasshoppers, but you'll have a lot of stuff going to your flowers, both for nectar and both for food. So this is a dragonfly. This is the eastern pond hawk. You can tell by its markings on its tail and the thorax color, and that's the thorax. Remember, insects have three parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. You can tell it's a dragonfly, one, because it's kind of a stocky, well-built body, and when they perch, they hold their wings open. We have another one that belongs to the Odonata family, which dragonflies are part of, and that's called damselflies. And they hold their wings closed above them, and their abdomen is real thin. And if you notice on the dragonfly, the eyes will actually touch in some parts, whereas a damselfly, the eyes are at the end of the head. They never touch anywhere. So dragonflies are great predators. Some people call them mosquito hawks, but dragonflies is more of a common name than mosquito hawks. And you can see they've got a lot of spines on their legs, and that's so as they're flying, they can catch insects in the air. And dragonflies are masters at flight. They can actually fly behind an insect and match its moves so that it actually makes them invisible to the insect, because it just seems like a stationary object. So dragonflies are amazing predators. And as you saw in the pond program, they start their life cycle out in the water as a dragonfly nymph, feeding on insects and worms, and some of the big dorners, they can actually feed on little fish. So that's the dragonflies. And we did net something very, very special, and I kind of tucked it away. This is a katydid. They're real similar to the grasshoppers, built a little bit bigger. They have long, spindly legs. And this particular bush katydid can be in a variety of colors: brown, red, pink, and green. And here we have kind of a pinkish red version of it. Let me get him out of here. And this one hadn't quite matured yet. Its wings are still developing. We can tell it's a bush katydid by the shape of its abdomen and also its ovipositor, which is the little tail part at the end of its abdomen. It's kind of hid behind the wings there. And that's what she would use for ovipositing into a branch of one of the blades of grass or one of the different hard stem grasses out here. And as with grasshoppers, when they're caught and frightened, they spit what we always called as kids tobacco juice, and it's just the plant juices that they've been ingesting. So this is a katydid, and a pink one. Like I say, they can be in bright red, brown, and green. Green's usually their natural color, but it's always special to find a pink or a red one. Now, how can a pink or a red one hide? Well, a lot of grasses in different stages of the grass's life will be pink or red, so they can blend in really well with the grasses, even at this bright red or pink color. So it is a form of camouflage. And you can see on their wing structures, katydids, their wings are going to have the veinage just like a leaf. So you can see some of the veining in the wing. It'll be a leaf-like structure. So that's another form of camouflage, especially when they're green or brown. They really, really blend into leaves. We'll go ahead and let this guy loose. This is a little katydid nymph, and we've said before they're real similar to grasshoppers. You can see he's got those long spindly legs. So this is a little nymph. They'll go through several sheds before they get to the same size as that pink one we had. So that's a little katydid. And here's one of our most colorful dragonflies. And this is called the Halloween Pennant. And you can see how colorful the wing pattern is. They're veined pretty much like stained glass with all the colors and the veinage of the wings. And you'll see them a lot out in the prairie. They love to perch on the end of the grass and stems, one of our most colorful. And this is the Halloween Pennant dragonfly. See if he'll hang around. Looks like he's gonna hang around. There he goes. Here we have a little walking stick, and they just get out on the grass blades and some of the dead stems, and they will hold still. And they look just like a stick. And then just wait for stuff to come along. And they will sway. Once they're standing on the stick, they'll just kind of sway, and it looks just like a blade of grass blowing in the wind. And that's part of their camouflage, so they don't get eaten. So walking sticks and mantis look somewhat similar, but the praying mantis will have the front legs for grasping with all the spines and for holding on to the prey. This is the Gulf fritillary, and as it's a butterfly, and butterflies and moths will have a proboscis that they will nectar with. Let me see if I can get this proboscis to come out. And there you can see the proboscis. Probably turn it around. And that's what they will use to get into the flower and suck up the nectar. And it just neatly coils up into a little slot under their head. And this is the Gulf fritillary. You can tell by all the silver spots underneath. Oops. And then the top is a bright orange. Well, was a bright orange. And this is what the Gulf fritillaries will feed on. They will lay their eggs on here, and then once the eggs hatch, the caterpillars will then eat the leaves, and once they've eaten enough and done their 5 molts, then they will build their chrysalis and then turn into a butterfly, just like the one we had. There's another fritillary that we have here, which is called the variegated, and it also feeds on the passion flower vine. All right, this is a male monarch butterfly, and you can tell by the wing pattern that it's a monarch, and we can tell it's a male by the little spot on its hind wing, and that's actually like a scent gland, and that's how the female will locate the male. So this is the monarch. Of course, this is their spring migration. They're heading back to Texas, and then they will mate, lay eggs, and then that breed will probably lay another generation, and they'll do that till the fall when they go through the last metamorphosis, and that one returns to Mexico. So this is the monarch butterfly, one of the iconic ones. Usually I prefer not to handle very many butterflies, especially netting, because most butterflies are real delicate, but monarchs have really tough wings, and also the scales on their color doesn't rub off like most butterflies. So it's always best not to capture butterflies. But that is the male monarch. And there he goes. Here we have another caterpillar, and this is the salt marsh caterpillar. And it's quite fuzzy, but it does not sting. A lot of fuzzy caterpillars do sting, or spiny ones. So this is, a lot of people call them a woolly bear, but usually the woolly bear is going to be black with a red band, then black. And so that's how you can tell the difference between the salt marsh caterpillar and the woolly bears. This is one of our native bees. This is the metallic sweat bee, and they are amazing little guys. And these little sweat bees, they will collect pollen. You can see it all over its legs. And what they do is they will find a hollow stem or maybe a hole in the stem of the grass, and they will go in there and they'll make a little cell, and they'll load that with pollen and maybe even get a little caterpillar or something, and the female lay her egg on there. She'll close that cell off and then do that for around 10 to 12 cells, and that's how they reproduce. And then when it comes time for those eggs to hatch, the last ones that she laid are the females or the males, and they'll come out first. And then they hang around and they wait for the females to hatch, and then they will chase them around, mate with them, and start the whole process all over. So these are native bees. They don't produce the honey, and they don't grow the big honeycombs and the colony hives that the honeybee does. And the honeybee is not a native bee. It was brought over by the early settlers. And the reason they had to bring it over is because our native bees don't produce honey in that type of quantity that the western honeybee does. And the settlers would use that as a food source as well as medicine. It was very good medicinal for salves and ointments. In fact, it's still used today. They have honey bandages that's used in large area of skin that needs to be regrown. The sugars in the honey on that bandage helps produce more skin cells, or helps the cells produce more. So honeybees are imported. They were done so because mainly it was of medicinal value, and when they got to America, there was no honeybees, so they had to bring their own. But these native bees are excellent pollinators. They can pollinate, they're specialized in the native plants. And so this is one of the most colorful, and this is the metallic sweat bee. Here's another one of our native bees. This looks like the male southern carpenter bee. They look very much like our fuzzy bumblebees, but if this one would stay still, you can see there's no fuzz on the abdomen and also on the thorax. They'll usually have, if you see the female, she'll be yellow around the thorax, which is just behind her head, but there'll be a little bald spot, and that's one of the indicators, that bald spot, and then no fuzz on the abdomen. Whereas the eastern bumblebee will have 2 or 3 yellow bands of hair on the abdomen, as well as the yellow hairs on the thorax. So this is one of our native bumblebees. So there was a bunch of little stuff, so a lot of little macro stuff would be hard to tell. If you're catching insects at your house, then you get you some little catch jars, even just little plastic containers that you have around your house. Anything that you can use to help contain the little insects. You can get some little cheap magnifying glasses at the 99-cent stores. Anything to help you look at the insects. You can get, the fancy little jars with the magnifying lid, but just about anything will work when you're looking for insects in your neighborhood or in your yard. So that's catching insects out on the prairie here at Brazos Bend. Now remember, you don't have to be out in a park. You have your own backyard, some of your neighborhood parks, some of the gardens in the neighborhood. So take an adult, grab you a couple little containers, a little net. A lot of times you don't even need that if you don't have anything. Just sitting in the shade along with a flower bed where the bees and the bugs are coming is a great way just to sit and watch and observe. You can learn a lot just by what the bee is doing, as well as trying to identify it, or the butterfly or whatnot. So just observing them can be a whole education in itself. What it's doing, how it's doing it, and what it's going to use that nectar for. And then you can take that knowledge to the house and look it up either in field guides or on the internet. But always make sure you take an adult with you, and be careful what you touch. Some things bite, sting, or spray, so be careful and enjoy yourself. Have fun chasing bugs.